today we are going to be going over our Week 7 power rankings for the 2025 NFL season. And before we get into these power rankings, quick disclaimer, this is going to be sort of like a reset week, right? Like there's going to be teams that jump a lot of spots even though their win that they got in Week 6 wasn't the most impressive. It's more because we're 6 weeks into the season, we're third of the way into the season, so there's going to be a lot of bigger jumps maybe because it's just more of a overarch, instead of sort of going off of what happened last week, this is more of just a reflection of the year as a whole, just to put that out there. So the first tier we have is the Jets at 32, the Titans at 31, the Raiders at 30, the Bengals at 29, the Dolphins at 28, the Browns at 27, and the Saints at 26. There's not a lot of movement going on in these teams. Now, the reason I kept the Jets at 32 is because, once again, still 0-6, and they had negative 10 net passing yards in an entire NFL game. Their defense did do pretty decent against Denver. I'll give them that. But they just haven't looked good at all. And I know the Titans put up 10 points against the Raiders, which isn't really that good. They just fired their head coach. But they have a win. The Jets don't. It's not all based off record, by the way. They could be flip-flop. I just think that the Jets, after what they did against the Broncos, deserve to be at 32. And again, Titans at 31. I mean, they've been one of the worst teams in the league all year long. So I just have them at 31. Then I have the Raiders at 30. I mean, they barely beat the Titans, who, again, have been one of the worst teams in the league. You put up 20 points against the Titans, and they haven't been impressive really at all. Outside of beating the Patriots, they haven't really done anything super impressive. Then the Bengals at 29. I mean, they honestly kind of had a somewhat chance to beat the Packers in Joe Flacco's first game. But you lose to the Packers team, who was a bit of a they weren't playing their best football, and you lose to them. Again, just hasn't looked good overall for the Bengals. Jamar Chase has played pretty solid the last 2 weeks, so that's good for the Bengals. But their O-line's still not good. Their run game's still not good. Their defense is still not good. And then the Dolphins at 28, they almost had a chance to beat the Chargers. They give up that touchdown late in that game. Honestly, Tua didn't have his best performance. Devon Achane had a good game, so you love to see that if you're the Dolphins. Darren Waller got in the end zone once again. But yeah, they've definitely been a slightly more competitive team, I'd say, than these bottom four teams. And again, they almost beat the Chargers, who are a good team, but I just don't. The Dolphins just still aren't a great team. The run defense can't do anything. And then the last two, the Browns and the Saints. These were, going into this week, two of my more competitive bad teams. And I think they showed that. I mean, the Browns didn't really show that. They got blown out by the Steelers. But not only are the Steelers a good team, but the Browns have been somewhat decent here and there for most of the season. Their defense has been great. And then the Saints, honestly, I mean, they beat the Giants, which looks even more impressive after the Giants beat the Eagles. And then they almost beat the Patriots, who just beat the Bills not 2 weeks ago. So the Saints have probably been the most competitive bad team on this list, hence why I have them at 26th. These teams are ranked by how competitive they have been. I know the Jets have been somewhat competitive considering they're 0-6, but they're 0-6, and they put up 11 points and did nothing this week. Next here, we have the Ravens at 25, the Giants at 24, Cowboys at 23, Cardinals 22, Texans 21, Panthers 20, Vikings 19, Bears 18, and the Falcons at 17. Ravens at 25. I know they're injured. I gave them a little bit of a grace when I had them at 17 last week, but another very disappointing game. I mean, 3 points is all they managed to get against the Rams. I'm surprised they only lost by 14 considering what they just did against Houston. But Part of that might be because Puka Nacua was injured for a good chunk of that game, but they haven't been good. Now, hopefully, this bye week can help them get healthy. They can get Lamar back, get some other pieces back, and go back to being hopefully a decent team. But right now, they're at 25. They're just not lower because their whole team is injured, whereas the other 7 teams, I guess outside of the Bengals missing Joe Burrow, are pretty healthy, at least in terms of their top end talent. So that's why the Ravens are still at 25, even though they haven't looked good. It's because not only are they missing their quarterback, but they're missing basically every other good player they have on that team. Giants at 24. They beat the Chargers, then they lose to the Saints, and they beat the Eagles. I don't know. This is sort of this tier of teams. These are the teams that I just really don't know how to fully analyze these teams, right? But Giants, the weirdest 3-week stretch I've ever seen out of a team. But Jackson Dart continues to play good. Great. Cam Scatterboot continues to play great. The defense, mainly the D-line, continues to be very good. So I'm impressed with what I've seen from the Giants, but their lows have been a little too low for me to put them higher than 24, but they're definitely going in the right direction. I will say that. Cowboys at 23, disappointing loss to the Panthers. Offense continues to play great. Defense continues to play terrible. They're just too inconsistent for me, which is why I have them at 23. You can't really blame Dak. You can't really blame that offense, especially considering all the O-line injuries they're dealing with as well. It's just the defense they can't stop anything. Cardinals at 22. The reason I'm taking them over the Cowboys right now is not only did they almost beat the Colts, one of the better teams in football, but the offense actually looked pretty good with under Jacoby Brissett. I still think Kyler Murray is the starting quarterback on this team. I still think they should stick with Kyler Murray. But that offense played pretty good. They also lost Marvin Harrison pretty early in that game as well, and still continued to play good. And while their offense is not to the levels of the Cowboys, their defense is a lot better. So I think their defense is like slightly above average, and their offense is slightly below average. And I think that beats out the Cowboys, who are on complete opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to their offense and defense. Texans at 21, bye week last week, so I didn't move them. Again, horrible start to the year for Houston, but coming off 2 pretty good wins in their last 2 games. The reason they're not higher is just because the wins haven't been the most. I mean, you shut out the Titans, who I have at 31, and then you blow out the Ravens, who I have at 25. Like, I know their losses came to good teams like Tampa and the Rams and the Jags, right? Those are 3 top 15, near top 10 teams, right? So those aren't bad losses by any means, but they just didn't look good at all in those losses, which is why they're still at 21. But they definitely are heading in a much better direction after those last 2 games they played. Panthers at 20, another team currently on the up. They've won 3 of their last 4 games. I know it was against Miami and against Dallas, but people didn't think they were going to win those games anyway. And against, same thing with Atlanta. They weren't predicted to win, and they won. The run game plays 2 great games. Rico Dowdle playing amazing. The O-line itself is just playing great. Bryce Young, if he continues to be this, if he just can avoid those mistakes, he's playing good. Defense playing well. They get a game against the Jets here, so they can go 4-3. They're in a much better place than you'd think, and they're definitely on that higher end of that second tier. Then we have the Vikings at 19. They did have a bye week, so I didn't want to punish them too much. I just really haven't liked what I've seen from the Vikings overall. I don't know how to. The Vikings are one of the more confusing teams because I just haven't been super impressed, but sometimes I have been impressed. You barely beat the Bears, who at the beginning of the season didn't look great. Then you get handily beaten by the Falcons. Then you blow out the Bengals. Then you lose to Pittsburgh, and then you barely beat the Browns. So I just don't know how to really fully view the Vikings. I haven't been the most impressed with them. We'll see what happens. I think McCarthy has the chance to come back this week, so we'll see what happens. Chicago at 18 and Atlanta at 17. Both teams coming off very impressive wins, both on Monday night. We should get rid of Monday night doubleheaders, by the way, in my personal opinion. But both of these teams coming off very impressive wins on Monday night. Bears beating the Commanders off a game-winning field goal, and the Falcons dominating the Bills, like in every aspect. It felt like the only thing the Falcons didn't do well was execute offensively in the second half. But their defense continues to play great, holding the Buffalo Bills to 14 points. And Michael Penix and that offense played great in the first half, kind of fizzled out there in the second half. But two teams, Atlanta and Chicago, very impressive wins. Ascending teams, Bears on a big win streak. Falcons on a 2-game win streak. So two teams going up, but again, with the Bears getting blown out by the Lions. And then the Falcons getting shut out by the Panthers. I just don't want to put them too high just because of what I've seen earlier in the year. The Bears also barely beat the Raiders as well. And again, the Vikings almost barely beat the Browns. So I don't want to put them... That's the Vikings, excuse me. The Falcons... Yeah, the Falcons get blown out by the Panthers. The Panthers have played better, but you got 30-0 by the Panthers. So, great wins last week for these two teams. They're improving, they're ascending. But what I've seen earlier in the year, similar to the Vikings and the Panthers and the Texans, I don't want to put them too high, but they definitely are on the up right now. Next tier of teams, we have the Patriots at 16, Steelers at 15, the Niners at 14, Commanders at 13, Jags at 12, and the Broncos at 11. I know teams like Pittsburgh and New England seem low. All right, I understand they seem low. First of all, New England. You barely beat the Saints. The Saints are one of the bottom teams in the league. You barely beat them, right? And on top of that, you lose to the Raiders, who I have at 30th. You barely beat the Dolphins, who are at 28. You lose to Pittsburgh. You blow out the Panthers. You beat the Bills. I'll give you that. Very impressive win against the Bills. And then you barely beat the Saints. I love what the Patriots are doing. Drake May's playing fantastic. The defense is playing great. But I just don't want to put them up too high. And I know they have 4 wins. But there are like 14 teams. There's like 12 teams in the league that also have 4 wins. And then there's the Packers, who are like 3-1-1. So just because you're 16 doesn't mean I have them a bunch. I have them below like 5-6 teams that have worse records than them. There's just a lot of good teams. And that's why the Patriots are at 6. And kind of similar thing with Pittsburgh. Now, they haven't really been challenged so far this season. I mean, you barely beat the Jets. That's definitely not a great win. Looking back at now what we've seen from the Jets, they let Justin Fields put up 32 points on them, who just had a net passing yards of 11, or of 10, negative 10. Then they get blown out by Seattle. Then they barely beat New England. Then they barely beat Minnesota. And then you blow out the Browns. In their defense, they haven't gotten a super difficult schedule. Their only difficult game was Seattle, and New England. And they've got blown out by Seattle and barely beat New England. So that's why they're at 15, New England at 16. They haven't had the toughest schedule. And again, there's just a lot of good teams with good records. So that's why they're maybe on the lower end. But I don't think they're that bad. I still think they're really good. I really like Pittsburgh and New England. But that is why I have them at 15 and 16. Then we got a bunch of teams that went down between San Fran, Washington, Jacksonville, and Denver. San Fran, tough loss to the Buccaneers. I know they're like one of the best teams in the league at this point, and they've just constantly been getting injured. They're still 4-2 despite all the injuries. I still think they're a very good team. Now, if I had them head-to-head against Pittsburgh and New England, I'd probably take Pittsburgh and New England right now just because of the injuries that San Fran has dealt with. But they beat Seattle week 1 in the season. Seattle's really good. They beat the Rams with some of these injuries. The Rams are really good. They're in a close game against Jacksonville, another really good team. So they've I think their quote unquote resume has been a little bit better than teams like Pittsburgh and New England, but they're right there in a similar tier. Same thing with Washington. Very up and down start to Washington's season. I mean, that Chargers win is really what's holding them up here, but they didn't look great against Chicago. They almost won the game, but it wasn't the prettiest win if they were to get that win. Jaden Daniels, obviously, we've seen this offense look a lot better with Jaden Daniels now. I know the offense was actually scoring a lot of points without Jaden Daniels, but the two games they played without Jaden Daniels were against the Falcons and the Raiders. And they put up 27 against the Falcons. That's pretty good. And then putting up 41 against the Raiders it's just putting up 41 against the Raiders, right? Still a good team. Do need to fix up on that defense, but we should see them continue to. I think they just need to get healthy. They need Terry McLaurin back. That's what they need. Then the Jags at 12, coming off of a tough loss to Seattle. Very ugly game. Still a very good team, don't get me wrong. They're still really high in the rankings, still 12. Defense is still very good. But there's been a little inconsistencies with Jacksonville, at least offensively, which is why I had them at 12. And then Denver at 11. You barely beat the Jets. It's basically why they dropped. I just haven't been blown away with Denver. Another inconsistent team. I mean, you beat the Titans in week 1 by 8 points. Then you lose to the Colts. Then you lose to the Chargers. Then you blow out the Bengals. Then you beat the Broncos, or beat the Jets, or beat the Eagles, excuse me. And then you barely beat the Jets. Again, similar to Jacksonville, still a very good team. They're still one of the better teams in the league. I still think they will make the playoffs. But just not fully committed to Denver yet. Next tier is the Rams at 10, the Packers at 9, the Chargers at 8, the Seahawks at 7, and the Chiefs at 6. Rams at 10. I mean, you only beat the Ravens by 14, which seems crazy to say. You beat a team by 14. That's a lot. But the Ravens aren't good, and you barely beat them, or not barely beat them, and you only beat them by 14. Also coming off a loss to an injured Niners team. Again, still one of the better teams in the league. Just got to wait and see about this Puka injury. This Puka injury could throw a wrench in how this Rams team plays over the course of Puka's injury. Puka could come back next week, and everything goes back to normal, but we got to see what happens with this whole Puka thing. Packers at 9. They honestly, yeah, they're 3-1-1, but you beat the Lions in week 1, which is a good win. But then you beat the Commanders, another good win, right? Started 2-0. 2 very good wins for the Packers. Like, oh my God, are the Packers one of the best teams in the league? Then you lose to the Browns. Then you tie with the Packers. And then you only put up 27 points against the Bengals. A Bengals defense that doesn't really stop anything. So I just think the last 3 weeks have not been very good for Green Bay. There's, again, similar to all these teams that have gone down, they're still high up on this list. They're still a good team. But there's just those little question marks, those little inconsistencies for me as to why they're at 9. Then the Chargers at 8 barely beat the Dolphins, another team that started off very good, that kind of hasn't looked that great these last set of weeks. You lose to the Giants. You get blown out by the Commanders, who just didn't do too much against Chicago. And then you barely beat the Dolphins. I still really like the Chargers. But I don't know. That run game isn't the best. It's against Miami. That's why they ran well. But overall, they haven't been that good on the ground. The O-line still hasn't been very good. Justin Herbert seems to be getting pressured like every other time he drops back. And who would have thought They need Quentin Johnston back. The offense looked pretty good without him, but again, it's the Dolphins. But they need to get Quentin Johnston healthy. And again, still a good team. But these last 3 weeks, similar to Green Bay, I just haven't been in love with what I've seen from the Chargers. And then these next two teams, the Chiefs and Seahawks, I know 7-spot jumps seem very high, but the Seahawks beat a very good Jags team. And the Chiefs beat a Lions team pretty easily, who I had at number 1 going this week. And I think we'll get another team at 5 who has a very similar theme to what I did with the Seahawks and Chiefs, but Seahawks look legit. Jackson Smith-Njigba, one of the best players, one of the offensive player of the year favorites. Sam Darnold's playing fantastic. The defense is playing super good. They got to Trevor Lawrence so much in that game. And overall, I've been very impressed with Seattle. I've had them low just because I haven't been in love with maybe the wins they've gotten, but pretty good win against Jacksonville. And I think it's finally time. As I said before, this is like a reset week. I think it's about time I give them their credit and put them at 7. And then Chiefs at 6, same thing. I mean, week 6 kind of factors in too because they easily beat my number 1 going into that week. The offense looks a lot better now that they're getting healthy. Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought that when their number 1 receivers aren't Hollywood Brown and Juju, that they can actually, put up good offensive numbers. We've seen that now that Worthy's back, and they're about to get Rashee Rice back next week as well. So this offense could get even better. The defense is playing very good, and we're starting to see the Chiefs look a little bit more like the Chiefs that we know and that we've been accustomed to. At number 5, as I mentioned, similar to the Chiefs and Seahawks, I have the Colts. Another team that, because they haven't really had the most impressive schedule, I've kept them on the lower end of the power rankings. But I think it's about time I give them their credit at 5. I mean, they're one of the only 5-win teams in the league. I think one of the only 2 5-win teams. I think it's them and the Bucks. Yeah, they're one of the only 2 5-win teams. Now Pittsburgh, granted, they're 4-1 because they've had a bye week, but one of the 2 5-win teams in the league. One of the best defenses in the league. One of the best offenses in the league. Daniel Jones continues to play great. Jonathan Taylor continues to be one of the best running backs in football. Tyler Warren continues to be one of the better tight ends as a rookie. Common theme with tight ends, it seems like. The best tight end in each rookie class is also one of the best tight ends in the league the last 3 years, with Laporta, Bowers, and now Warren. So they're one of the best teams in the league, and I felt like it was about time to get them to that spot. However, I know the teams above them haven't looked the best, either overall, the last few weeks, but the talent on that team is just too much to deny, which is why I only have the Colts at 5. And at 4, I have the Bills. Tough loss against Atlanta. And honestly, when you look at the Bills' schedule, it hasn't really been that impressive, to be honest. You beat the Ravens by 1, which was a decent win because they were healthy then. Then you beat the Jets. Then you beat the Dolphins. Then you beat the Saints. Then you lose to the Patriots. And then you lose to the Falcons. Not the best resume there for Buffalo. Now, I still have them at 4 because they're still really good. Josh Allen is still one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But they do need to get it figured out, especially on defense, because that defense is not a Super Bowl caliber defense right now. But I still think they're one of the better teams in the league. Same thing with the Eagles. Now, their wins have been, they actually have had some good wins, unlike the Bills. Beating teams like the Chiefs was a very good win for them. Beating the Cowboys. I know the Cowboys, I have them at 23, but I still think that was a solid win. But yeah, another team that just hasn't looked great the last few weeks. Also, beating the Buccaneers was a big win, especially because they were blowing out the Bucs in the first half. Beating the Rams was a good win coming back. So they've had some good wins. Still a very good team. But I don't think they deserve the top 2 spots just from what we've seen the last 2 weeks, losing to Denver and losing to the Giants. And then at 2, we have the Detroit Lions. I know they lost to the Chiefs pretty handily, and I still have them 4 spots above the Chiefs. It's just because they were the number 1 team in the league last week. They were on a roll last week. They were looking like the Detroit Lions we know. And I think they just ran into a tough matchup against Kansas City. Still think they're one of the better teams in the league. And unlike teams like Philly and Buffalo, they haven't been on a bad run. Right? This week was their first bad week since week 1. So I still want to give them their credit at number 2, but I'm very skeptical about them at number 2. And then lastly, number 1 is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Not anything I thought would happen going in this year, but Baker Mayfield is playing out of his mind. I'd argue he's the MVP right now, considering he has like none of his top guys available. But the Bucs continue to be super, super good. They were playing a lot of close games, right? Early on, you barely beat the Falcons, you barely beat the Texans, you barely beat the Jets. Then you get somewhat blown out by the Eagles just based on the first half. But then you beat Seattle, which is a good win. Then you beat San Fran, which was a good win. And not only did they beat San Fran, they beat San Fran very easily. And again, they're doing it without Mike Evans, without Chris Godwin. The O-line's been banged up, I'm pretty sure. In fact, Ibuka's now injured. Bucky Irving's been injured. Kate Otten, I think, has been somewhat banged up as well. And they continue to impress, especially Baker Mayfield. Defense finally had a really good performance for the first time since week 2 against the Texans, holding San Fran to 19 points. And I don't think it's a bad thing to say that the Bucs are the best team in the league. And that will conclude our power rankings for Week 7, or for the upcoming week of Week 7. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. Subscribe if you're new, and let me know in the comment section below what you agree with or disagree with these power rankings. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.